Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time. Not to a gilded, romanticized past of brave knights and fair maidens, but to the muddy, flea-ridden reality of the Middle Ages. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. The air thick with the smell of wood smoke. Unwashed bodies, and something you can't quite place. Probably sewage. You're standing in a village. The huts cobbled together with wattle and daub. A thin film of perpetual grime clinging to every surface. The streets, if you can even call them that, are just muddy ruts, crisscrossed by chickens and pigs. This isn't a fantasy, this is your new life. And the reality is, you probably wouldn't survive a single week, let alone a day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the pale, watery light of a medieval morning. The sun isn't a warm promise, it's just a marker for when the work begins. Your bed is a straw pallet on the dirt floor, shared with a few family members and maybe a dog. The straw is lumpy and probably houses a few unwanted guests, fleas, ticks, and maybe a mouse or two. You roll over, the rough wool of your tunic scratching against your skin. And the first thing you notice is the smell. It's overwhelming. There's the reek of the privy pit just outside the door. The acrid smoke from the central fire pit that's been smoldering all night. And the general funk of living in close quarters without a single hot shower in sight. Your clothes are the same ones you've been wearing for weeks. And they've absorbed every odor. Forget your modern detergent. Here, you're lucky if they get a good beating with a stick in the river once a month. The concept of sanitation as we know it simply doesn't exist. You've heard of Roman baths. But those are a distant, forgotten luxury. Here, people believe bathing too much can make you sick, exposing you to bad humors and whatnot. So, you don't. You deal with the constant itch, the thick layers of dirt, and the knowledge that your breath probably smells like the weak ale you drank for breakfast. And that brings us to the most basic of needs, water. Clean water is a myth. The stream you get your water from is the same one that's downstream from where the village does its laundry, washes its animals, and, yes, uses the privy. Waterborne diseases are a constant, invisible threat. You just can't see the cholera or dysentery waiting for you in that refreshing sip. Your home is a small, single-room dwelling. The walls are woven branches plastered with mud and dung. A surprisingly decent insulator but also a breeding ground for insects. There's no chimney. Just a hole in the roof. So the room is perpetually smoky. A haze that burns your eyes and coats your lungs. Historians still argue whether this smoke actually helped preserve the timbers from rot and bugs. But you're too busy coughing to care. There's a distinct feeling of being trapped. Of being surrounded by the very earth you're expected to work. Your life is not separate from the mud, it's a part of it. The floor is packed dirt. And a pig might wander in to share a meal with you. It's all just one big sensory overload of ew. The concept of personal space? Forget about it. Your family of 6 lives in this one room. Your parents sleep on the better pallet. And you and your siblings are piled together on a less comfortable one. All for the sake of warmth and saving space. Privacy is non-existent. You eat, sleep, and live within a few feet of each other. Constantly surrounded by the sounds, smells, and movements of your family. It's a close-knit community. But not in the Hallmark movie way. It's more like a sardine can with a lot more fleas. The one mainstream historical fact that hits you is the sheer lack of physical comfort. Your world is hard, lumpy, and perpetually damp. This isn't a cozy cabin. It's a survival pod made of sticks and dirt. A quirky tidbit you learn quickly is the use of rushlights, reeds dipped in animal fat to provide a meager, flickering light. It's a candle, but for poor people. It smells awful, but it's all you have to push back against the consuming darkness of the night. You lie there, listening to the soft rustle of straw, the rhythmic breathing of your family, and the distant howl of a wolf. And you realize, as the smoke stings your eyes, that this is just the beginning. The day hasn't even started yet, and you're already exhausted by the sheer effort of simply existing. The sun finally crests the horizon. A weak, almost grudging light, and you're already on your feet. There's no snooze button here. No leisurely coffee. Your daily grind is dictated by the arc of the sun and your body is your only alarm clock. As soon as you step outside, the cold air hits you, a sharp contrast to the smoky warmth of the hut. The morning dew soaks your thin leather shoes and the hem of your tunic. And you feel the chill all the way to your bones. It's a constant, low-level discomfort you just have to live with. You trudge toward the fields, your bare feet or thin shoes sinking into the mud. Your day is not a series of tasks, it's one long, unbroken slog of physical labor. You don't have a job title like marketing associate or web developer, you are simply a peasant, a serf, and your entire existence is tied to the land. Your main tool is a hoe or a simple wooden plow, and the work is relentless. You spend your day breaking up clods of earth, planting seeds, or pulling weeds. Your back aches, your hands are raw and calloused, and the sun beats down on your neck. There's no such thing as a lunch break in the modern sense. You eat a piece of hard bread and maybe some cheese or dried meat. If you're lucky, right there in the field. There's no sitting on a log, scrolling through your phone. You're just trying to get enough calories to fuel the next few hours of backbreaking work. You've heard whispers of a few peasants who have managed to acquire an iron plowshare. A truly revolutionary piece of technology. But that's a luxury for the most prosperous villages. For you, it's wood and muscle. The work is not just hard, it's risky. One misstep with a scythe and you could lose a finger. A farming accident could mean an infected wound, a fever, and a quick trip to the great beyond. There's no workers' comp, no disability insurance. If you can't work, you can't eat. It's a simple, brutal equation. The work never really stops. Even in the winter, when the ground is frozen, you're not on vacation. You're mending fences, repairing tools, gathering firewood. Your life is a continuous cycle of survival and preparation. You have to be an expert in everything from farming to animal husbandry to basic carpentry. Your skill set is a mile wide and a mile deep because your survival depends on it. A mainstream historical fact you'd learn is that the medieval farming year was strictly governed by the seasons and the church calendar. The Feast of St. John marked the summer solstice and was a crucial time for harvesting. Life revolved around these dates, which were often more important than the day of the week. This isn't a 9-to-5 life, it's a dawn-to-dusk existence. And every single day matters. A quirky tidbit is the use of fallowness. To avoid exhausting the soil, fields were often left unplanted for a year or two. This rest period was called fallow, and it was a surprisingly effective way to maintain crop yields without modern fertilizers. Imagine having a third of your backyard just empty because you're worried about soil health. It was just a regular part of life. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly slaves, or if serfs had more freedom of movement than previously thought. But as you stand in the field, your back screaming, you can't see the difference. You are tied to this land. You can't leave without the Lord's permission. And even then, it's almost impossible. Your Lord owns the land, the mill, the oven, and the forest. You can't even bake your own bread or hunt for your own game without paying him a fee. He takes a portion of your crops, your livestock, and your time. You owe him service, labor on his land, and a host of other duties. You are a cog in his economic machine, and you have no say in the matter. This isn't a job you can quit, it's a life sentence. As the sun begins to set, you finally get a break. The feeling of relief is immense, but it's temporary. You have to gather your tools and make the long, slow walk back to the village. You're exhausted, covered in mud and sweat, and you know you have to do it all again tomorrow. The soft glow of the firelight in your hut beckons. A small, warm spot in the vast, cold landscape. But even there, the work isn't done. There are clothes to mend, food to prepare, and a family to care for. Your day is over, but your struggle isn't. After a day spent covered in dirt and sweat, you trudge back to your little hovel, the weariness a heavy cloak on your shoulders. The sun is sinking, and the air is getting a new, evening chill. But before you can even think about rest, you have to deal with the practicalities of medieval life. And right now, that means your clothes, your tunic, woven from coarse wool or rough linen, is a constant source of discomfort. It's itchy, stiff, and has absorbed every scent from the day's labor and the general atmosphere of the village. There's no soft cotton or stretchy spandex here. Your clothes are built for durability, not comfort. The wool, while warm, feels like wearing a burlap sack. And the linen, though lighter, gets grimy so quickly it's almost pointless. You probably have only 1 or 2 outfits, and they're rarely washed with anything more than a rinse in a cold stream. The idea of soap is a luxury, a weird concoction of animal fat and lye that's more for cleaning clothes than skin. And you only use it on special occasions if at all, so you live with a perpetual, low-level stench. People don't just smell bad, they have a distinct, personalized musk that follows them everywhere. And that's not even counting the parasites. Remember the fleas and lice from section 1? They're your constant companions. You spend a surprising amount of time picking them out of your hair and off your clothes. A mainstream historical fact is that knit combs, often made of bone or wood, were common personal grooming items, showing just how widespread these pests were. It's a constant battle you'll never win. And then there's the hygiene, or lack thereof. The lack of clean water and soap means you rarely bathe. When you do, it's usually just a quick, cold dunk in a river. The phrase, taking a bath, as we know it, warm water, bubbles, candles, is a fantasy. For you, it's a necessary, cold chore. A quirky tidbit you'd notice is that people might rub themselves with a special oil after bathing. Not for scent, but to repel fleas, which just goes to show how much of a problem they were. You also have to deal with your teeth, which are probably rotting from a diet heavy in coarse bread and lacking in any kind of dental care. Tooth decay is rampant, and if a tooth hurts, your only option is to have it pulled, probably by the local barber, who also does bloodletting. And don't even get me started on the things people used for other hygiene needs. Let's just say there's a reason you always carry a small cloth with you. The societal view on all this is simple. Cleanliness is for the rich. For you, a peasant, it's an unnecessary luxury. You are what you are, and you'll smell how you smell. The lack of personal hygiene is a silent, but very real, threat to your health, a gateway for infections and diseases to take hold. But nobody really thinks about it that way. They just accept it as a fact of life, like the changing seasons or the Lord's taxes. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly as unhygienic as popular culture depicts or if they had their own methods of staying clean that we just don't understand. But from your perspective, the answer is pretty clear: it stinks. Literally. So as you settle in for the night, you take off your shoes, which are probably just scraps of leather tied around your feet, and maybe a layer of clothing if you're feeling bold. And you fall onto your straw mattress. You're too tired to care about the persistent itch or the faint smell of the fire that clings to your hair and clothes. The cold stone of the hearth feels good on your aching feet for a moment. And then you're gone, fast asleep, dreaming of a world with hot water and a really good bar of soap. And maybe a pair of socks that don't smell like a farm animal. The small comforts we take for granted would be the greatest luxuries in this world. A soft blanket, a clean shirt, a hot cup of tea. These are the things you'd miss the most. You lie there, the straw rustling under you, and you realize that even simple comfort is a privilege you don't possess. You wake up feeling a new ache in your back and a faint, persistent cough from the smoke. But today, it's not just about the fields. Someone in the village is sick, and you're reminded of the brutal reality of medieval medicine. There's no doctor's office, no pharmacy, just a collection of folk remedies and a few people who have a vague idea of what they're doing. You've heard the whispers about the local barber surgeon. He's the one who will pull your tooth, let your blood, and maybe, just maybe, set a broken bone. His tools are probably rusty, and the concept of sterile is as foreign to him as a car. A mainstream historical fact is the theory of the four humors, which dominated medical thought for centuries. Physicians believed the body contained four essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that disease was caused by an imbalance. The treatment for this imbalance was often extreme. If you had a fever, they'd assume you had too much blood. So the remedy was a good old-fashioned bloodletting. They'd nick a vein, usually with a flea-infested leech, and let the blood drain into a bowl. The goal was to restore balance. But the result was often a severe loss of blood and an open wound that could easily get infected. It's a miracle anyone survived. You might also be prescribed herbal remedies. The local, cunning woman knows which plants can help with which ailments. A knowledge passed down through generations. Some of these remedies are surprisingly effective. A poultice of willow bark, for instance, which contains salicin, an early form of aspirin, could actually help with pain. Others are less so. A quirky tidbit you might come across is the use of animal dung for a variety of purposes. For instance, dried crocodile dung was a rumored ancient Egyptian sunscreen. A bizarre bit of historical trivia you'd probably want to forget. But it's not just about external remedies. For internal issues, you might be given an emetic to make you vomit or a strong laxative to clear your system. All in the name of expelling the bad humors. The cure was often more unpleasant than the disease. Historians still argue whether the medical treatments of the time were truly as ineffectual as we believe or if some of the folk remedies and spiritual practices actually had a genuine, albeit misunderstood, therapeutic effect. Maybe the placebo effect was strong back then. Or maybe some of these plant-based medicines truly did work. But from your perspective, it all seems like a terrifying gamble. The thought of a rusty blade coming at you to balance your humors is enough to make you feel a little queasy. The whole system is based on superstition and guesswork, not on science. You're more likely to pray to a saint for a speedy recovery than you are to trust a barber surgeon. Then there's the spiritual side of medicine. Illness is often seen as a punishment from God or a sign of demonic influence. You go to church and pray, light candles, and maybe go on a pilgrimage to a holy site in the hopes of a divine cure. Miracles are the only things that truly inspire hope. The church has a monopoly on hope, promising salvation and healing, and you cling to that promise because you have no other real option. If someone gets sick, they are not only physically ill but spiritually tested. There's no such thing as a simple cold. Everything is a cosmic event. You might see a man with a fever, and the entire village will pray over him, not just for a quick recovery, but for the salvation of his soul. It's a stark contrast to our modern world of immediate care and prescribed antibiotics. As you walk back to your hovel, you pass the sick man's home. The air hangs heavy with a different kind of fear, not just of a bad harvest, but of a pestilence that could sweep through and take everyone you know. You can't help but think that your best bet for a long life is to just not get sick. Ever. It's a terrifying thought in a world full of unseen germs and visible dangers. Your sense of security is non-existent, and every day is a small gamble. The soft thud of your feet on the dirt path is the only thing grounding you. As if the constant fear of disease wasn't enough, you're also reminded every single day that you don't own your own life. You are a serf, tied to the land, a piece of property that goes along with the manor. This isn't a modern job with a contract, it's an inherited obligation. Your family has worked this land for generations, and your children will too. The concept of upward mobility is almost non-existent for you. You are a small cog in a massive, unyielding feudal machine. A mainstream historical fact is that the feudal system was a complex hierarchy based on land ownership and loyalty. At the top was the king, who owned all the land, and then he granted parcels of it to his nobles in exchange for military service. Those nobles, in turn, granted parcels to lesser lords, and so on, until you get to the bottom of the pyramid, where you stand. You don't have a lord because you chose him. You have him because he owns the land you live on. Your entire existence is framed by what you owe your lord. You owe him a portion of your harvest, a tithe that is essentially his rent for your life. You owe him your labor, working his fields for a certain number of days a week, a duty known as corvée. This is often the most grueling work, and you must prioritize it even if your own fields are suffering. You also owe him a fee to use his mill to grind your grain, his oven to bake your bread, and his forest to gather wood. Even if you built your own oven, you would be forbidden to use it. These are called banalities, and they're a constant reminder of his control. Every aspect of your life, from the food you eat to the warmth of your hearth, is a transaction with your Lord. And it's not just about the work. Your Lord is also the law. He can settle disputes, administer justice, and punish you for any perceived infraction. There is no appeal. His word is final. It's a terrifying lack of agency. You can't even get married without his permission, and he can levy a tax on your family to do so. Historians still argue whether some serfs had more rights or autonomy than others, depending on the specific feudal agreement in their region. But you feel like a prisoner with an open-air sentence. Your life is a web of obligations you were born into, and there is no clear path out. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is the tradition of merchet, a fee a serf had to pay their lord when their daughter married someone from another manor. It was a tax on the Lord losing a potential worker. And it's a stark example of how little control you had over your own family. The idea of freedom is something that you don't even have the words to describe. You might hear whispers of a few free peasants who own their own land. But they are rare. For you, the land is both your life and your cage. You work it, you live on it, and you'll be buried in it. All for the benefit of someone you may have only seen a few times from a distance. You've heard stories of peasants trying to run away to the cities. But the risks are immense. If you're caught, the punishment is severe. And even if you make it to the city, life there is no picnic. You'd likely just exchange one form of servitude for another. The constant pressure of these obligations weighs on you. Every seed you plant, every weed you pull, and every moment you spend in the field is a testament to your lack of freedom. As you walk back to your hut, the sun setting behind the Lord's manor, you can't help but feel a deep sense of injustice. The Lord's castle, a stone fortress on the hill, seems impenetrable and almost like a symbol of your powerlessness. You see the glint of a knight's armor and the fine clothes of the Lord's family. A world away from your rough tunic and mud-caked hands. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that you are the foundation of their entire existence. Yet you gain so little from it. You are simply a pair of hands for them to use. And as you fall into your straw bed, you realize that your life is not your own. And it never will be. With your back aching from the corvée and your soul weary from the weight of your feudal obligations, your stomach begins to rumble. It's time for the most important meal of the day. A meal that is less about pleasure and more about pure survival. The peasant's diet is simple, repetitive, and designed to provide just enough energy to keep you working. You'll probably eat a bowl of pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables are available: cabbage, onions, turnips, maybe some peas or beans. There might be some oats or barley to thicken it up. But meat is a rare luxury, reserved for special feast days or the occasional poaching, a crime that could get you hanged. A mainstream historical fact about the medieval diet is that it was heavily reliant on grains. The average peasant consumed a truly staggering amount of bread, up to several pounds a day. This bread wasn't the fluffy white loaf you're used to, it was a dark, heavy, and coarse bread made from rye or barley flour, often mixed with ground acorns or sawdust to stretch it further. It was hard on the teeth and even harder on the digestion. But it was your primary source of calories. A quirky tidbit is the concept of trenchers, which were thick slices of stale bread used as plates. After the meal, the food-soaked trencher was either eaten, given to the poor, or fed to the dogs. It's a very practical, and slightly gross, way of doing dishes. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were more or less healthy than we think. While they lacked a varied diet and suffered from poor hygiene, they also had a low intake of processed sugar and often had a more physically active lifestyle. But as you chew on a piece of hard, gritty bread, you're not thinking about long-term health. You're thinking about the hunger that gnaws at you every day and the fact that you're eating the same meal you ate yesterday and will probably eat tomorrow. The flavor is a distant memory, it's all just sustenance. You've heard stories from traveling merchants about spices like pepper and cinnamon. But they sound like something from a fairy tale. For you, the most exciting flavor you might get is a wild onion you found while foraging. The lack of variety is brutal. You live and die by the harvest. If there's a bad harvest, there's a famine. You've heard the old stories of entire villages starving to death because the rains didn't come or the crops were blighted. Your life is a constant gamble with nature. The small garden plot you're allowed to keep for your family is a precious resource. You tend it with care, pulling every weed and checking for every pest. Because a single carrot could make the difference between a full belly and a hungry night. And when you do get something special, like a tough piece of salted meat from a pig, it's a cause for celebration. You chew it slowly, savoring every last bit of flavor, knowing it might be a long time until you have something so good again. The one good thing about your diet is the beer or ale. Clean drinking water is so scarce that you and your family drink weak, low-alcohol ale all day long. Children drink it, too. It's a safer alternative to the polluted river water and provides a few calories. It's your morning coffee, your afternoon pick-me-up, and your evening relaxer, all rolled into one. It's so much a part of your life that you don't even think of it as alcohol. It's just water with a bit of a kick. But even that is a luxury. You can't just brew it whenever you want. You have to pay the Lord for the privilege. Everything comes back to him. You sit by the fire. The taste of the pottage still in your mouth. And you feel the weariness seep into your bones. The food is gone, and so is the short burst of energy it provided. The night is long, and tomorrow the hunger will be back, ready for another meager meal of bread and pottage. It's a repetitive, unforgiving cycle. As you eat your unappetizing dinner, you catch a glimpse of a child playing with a stick outside. And you're reminded that childhood in the Middle Ages is not the carefree time we think of today. There is no long period of innocence and play. For you, the peasant, childhood is simply a brief training period for a life of labor. A mainstream historical fact is that children began working at a very young age. Often as young as 5 or 6. They were not seen as miniature adults, but they were certainly expected to contribute to the family's survival as soon as they were physically able. There are no toys, no school, no cartoons, just an apprenticeship in survival. Your own memories of childhood are a blur of chores. At first, you were tasked with small things, gathering firewood, fetching water from the polluted stream, chasing chickens out of the hut. These tasks, while seemingly simple, are crucial to the family's survival. And as you get older, the tasks grow more demanding. You are taught how to weed the fields, how to herd the livestock, how to help with the planting and harvesting. There is no formal education, just a transfer of knowledge from one generation to the next. A kind of hands-on survival curriculum. There's no time for games or frivolity. At least not in the way we think of them. Your play, if you have any, is a reflection of your future life. You'd play with sticks as swords or make dolls out of rags, mimicking the adult world around you. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is that in some parts of medieval Europe, children were often dressed in loose-fitting tunics until around the age of 6 or 7. A practice that made them easier to clean and allowed for quick, unfussed potty breaks, and only then would they be breeched and given more fitted clothing. It's a stark reminder that even clothing was a practical decision, not a fashionable one. Historians still argue whether the concept of childhood as a distinct developmental stage even existed in the Middle Ages, or if children were just viewed as small versions of adults. But you'd be hard-pressed to see much of a difference between the work a 10-year-old does and the work of a young adult. Except for the size of the tools. The threat of death is also a constant presence in a child's life. The infant mortality rate is terrifyingly high. You've seen many of your younger siblings or cousins die from simple fevers, bad milk, or a cough. It's a cruel reality that you learn to live with. A kind of emotional armor you had to build early on. There are no hospitals, no vaccines, no antibiotics, so a simple illness can be fatal. The sadness is a familiar guest, but you don't have time to mourn. Life moves on, and there are chores to be done. You'd probably see a pregnant woman in the village and whisper a silent prayer for her. Birth is a dangerous game, and both the mother and child are at risk. It's a moment of life and death, and you see it firsthand. As you finish your pottage, you remember a time when you were a child and you found a smooth, perfect stone in the field. It felt like a treasure. You kept it for a long time, carrying it in your pocket. A small bit of beauty in a world of mud and grime. That was your one toy. You wonder what happened to it. Maybe you lost it during a long day of weeding. Or maybe it got swept away in the rain. But you don't have time to be sentimental. The night is falling, and you have to get ready for bed. The cold will creep in, and the straw will feel lumpy. But you'll be so exhausted that it won't matter. Childhood is over for you, and the work of being a peasant is all that is left. You are not a child, but you're not quite an adult yet, and you feel stuck in a limbo of endless labor. And you think to yourself, I'd give anything for a single afternoon with a video game and a bag of chips. But alas, those are luxuries you can't even begin to imagine. The sun is a sliver on the horizon, and you're walking back to your hovel. Your tired feet a familiar rhythm on the dirt path. But as you enter the village square, you stop. There's a crowd gathering, and a hush falls over the usual chatter of a village winding down for the night. You move closer, your heart thumping a little faster. And you see it. It's a man from a neighboring village, and he's been caught stealing a loaf of bread. The punishment is about to begin. This is justice, medieval style. A mainstream historical fact is that punishments for crimes were often public and brutal, designed not just to punish the individual but to serve as a warning to the entire community. There are no prisons as we know them. That's a luxury the Lord doesn't want to pay for. Instead, punishments are swift, painful, and often permanent. The man is led to the whipping post, and you watch as the whip falls, each crack a sickening sound in the quiet evening. You've seen this before. You've seen people put in the stocks for minor infractions, their heads and hands locked in place while the village children throw rotten vegetables at them. You've seen thieves have their hands cut off. A harsh and permanent sentence. The punishment is not designed to reform, it's designed to maim and to instill fear. Historians still argue whether these public punishments were a necessary part of social control in a world without formal police forces, or if they were simply a cruel way for the ruling class to assert their power. But as you watch the man writhe in pain, you don't feel a sense of justice, you feel a chilling mix of fear and pity. You know that you are only a few bad decisions, a few hungry days, away from being in his place. A quirky tidbit you might learn is that in some villages, a common punishment for a scold or a gossip was the cucking stool, or ducking stool. A woman would be tied to a chair on a long arm and repeatedly dunked into a river or pond. A very public and humiliating way to be punished. It's a reminder that even social infractions could be met with physical punishment. The Lord's justice is a terrifying thing because it is so arbitrary. He can make a judgment based on whim, and there is no court of appeals. Your life is literally in his hands. You know that if you were to cross him, you wouldn't get a trial with a lawyer, you would get a punishment. The law is not a set of rules but the will of the man who owns the land. This is the ultimate form of power. You have to be incredibly careful with everything you do, and everything you say. The fear of punishment is a constant, low-level dread that follows you everywhere. It's a kind of self-policing, because you know that if you break the rules, the consequences will be severe and public. You remember once, a few years ago, when the Lord's favorite hunting dog went missing, and he rounded up a few of the young men in the village and threatened them with a week in the pillory if they didn't confess. The dog turned up 2 days later, but the lesson was learned. The Lord's power is absolute, and your life is not worth the life of his dog. As the man is finally untied, he stumbles away, his body broken and his spirit defeated. You watch him go, and you walk away, too, a cold feeling in the pit of your stomach. You realize that you're not just a farmer, a serf, or a parent. You are also a spectator, a witness to a system of justice that is based on fear and pain. And you know that you are a single misstep away from being the one on display. The soft rustle of the leaves in the wind sounds like a whisper, a silent warning. After witnessing the brutal display of justice, you feel a desperate need to forget, to escape, even for just a little while. So you seek out a moment of leisure, a break from the endless toil. But this isn't a modern weekend of binge watching or shopping. Your entertainment options are simple, crude, and often communal. A mainstream historical fact is that entertainment for a peasant was often tied to the church calendar or the rhythm of the agricultural year. Feast days were a time for celebration, and a welcome interruption to the monotony of daily life. This is when the village would gather, and you'd be able to see traveling performers, maybe a jester or a minstrel, who would entertain you with stories and songs. The sound of a lute, or a simple drum, would be enough to bring a hush over the crowd. The stories are old, familiar tales of knights and dragons, but they still have the power to transport you, even for a few minutes. A quirky tidbit is the popularity of certain games. For instance, stoolball was a game resembling cricket or rounders, and skittles, a form of bowling, was also very popular. These games were simple, requiring little equipment, and were often played in a village green. But you also know that games could turn ugly. You've seen fights break out over a bad throw or a disputed point. This isn't a world of good sportsmanship, it's a world of high stakes and short tempers. Even your games are a reflection of your hard life. And then there's the ale. The low-alcohol ale is not just a safer alternative to water, it's a social lubricant. The local alehouse is the center of the village social life, a place where you can get away from your crowded hut and talk with your neighbors. The conversation is probably a mix of gossip, complaints about the Lord, and stories of a bad harvest. It's not a place to solve your problems, but it's a place to forget them for a little while. But even here, there's no privacy. Everyone knows everyone's business, and a few too many ales can lead to a fight or a long-standing feud. You sit on a rough-hewn bench, your cup of ale warm in your hands, and you listen to the chatter. It's a small comfort, but it's all you have. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had a rich folk culture that was largely unrecorded, or if their lives were truly as dull and repetitive as they seem. We have records of the great stories and epics of the time. But what about the songs and jokes that were passed down from family to family? We'll probably never know for sure. But as you listen to a man tell a simple joke about a dishonest baker, you feel a connection to your neighbors, a shared moment of relief. You don't need a fancy play or a traveling circus to be entertained. You just need a moment of shared humanity. The biggest form of entertainment is probably the most dangerous: gossip. The news travels by word of mouth, and it's a mix of fact and rumor. You'll hear about a lord's new mistress, a knight's victory in a faraway land, or a new tax your lord is thinking of levying. It's a way of staying connected to the world, of knowing what's going on beyond your small village. But you know that you have to be careful with what you say. A misspoken word can lead to a lot of trouble. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier? Probably just a rumor that got started by someone who wanted to sound worldly. You sip your ale and listen, but you don't say much. You are a silent observer, taking in the small moments of joy and dread. As the night deepens, you get up to leave. The stars are a vast, cold blanket overhead, and you walk back to your hut. The taste of ale in your mouth. The memory of the whipping post is still fresh, but so is the sound of the laughter from the alehouse. This is your life, a constant balancing act between fear and the small, fleeting moments of happiness. The alehouse laughter and the flickering lights of the village huts fade into the cool darkness of the night. As you walk, you're reminded of how difficult it is to get from one place to another. The concept of a smooth, paved road is a long-forgotten Roman luxury. The paths you travel on are just muddy ruts, created by the constant passage of feet, hooves, and cartwheels. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval roads were poorly maintained, often just dirt tracks that turned into impassable mud pits after a rain. This made travel incredibly slow and arduous. A journey that would take you an hour by car would take you a week or more on foot. And every step would be a struggle. You can't just get in a carriage and go for a ride. The roads are not safe. There are no streetlights, no GPS, and no friendly signs pointing the way. There are only bandits, wild animals, and the constant threat of getting lost. Travel is a dangerous undertaking, and you're never truly alone. A quirky tidbit you'd notice is the use of crossroads and gallows as landmarks. If you wanted to give someone directions, you might say, "Go past the gallows and turn left at the old oak tree." It's a dark but very practical way of navigating a landscape with no formal signs. Historians still argue whether medieval people traveled more than we think. While most peasants were tied to their land, a significant number of people, like pilgrims, merchants, and soldiers, were constantly on the move, and their accounts of the roads tell us how difficult it was. Your journey home, even if it's just from the alehouse, is a reminder of this. You hear the rustle of leaves, and you stop, holding your breath, wondering if it's a wild boar or a desperate thief. You are always on high alert. The darkness is not a tranquil quiet, it's a living thing, full of potential dangers. The fear of the unknown is a constant companion on the road. And you'd never dream of traveling alone at night. You'd always go with a group, a small caravan of your neighbors. For safety, the river crossing is another major obstacle. There are few bridges, and you have to rely on a ford or a rickety ferry. You've heard stories of people drowning, of carts being swept away by a sudden current. The river is not a scenic backdrop. It's a powerful force of nature that can kill you if you're not careful. You look at the dark water of the stream you have to cross and you feel a shiver of fear. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier? That's about as useful as a map in this world. There's no technology to save you. It's just your wits and your luck. You step into the cold water, your toes sinking into the muddy bottom, and you hurry across, the current tugging at your legs. The journey to the next village, even if it's just a few miles away, is a major event. You have to prepare for it, packing food and water, and you have to get the Lord's permission to leave the manor. It's a risk, but sometimes a necessary one, for trade or to visit a relative. When you get back, you're exhausted, your feet are blistered, and you feel a deep, immense relief. You'd never complain about traffic again. The idea of getting into a car and just driving for hours would seem like the most magical, unbelievable superpower. You lie in your straw bed, the memory of the cold water still on your legs, and you realize that even a simple journey is a monumental undertaking in this life. You're finally back in your hovel. The mud from the journey still caked on your shoes. Or what's left of them. You sit by the fire. The day's journey of fresh memory. And you realize that a huge part of your life is not physical but spiritual. The church bells, which you can hear even from your village, are not just for telling time, they are the clock of your existence. A mainstream historical fact is that the Catholic Church was the single most powerful and influential institution in medieval Europe. It wasn't just a place of worship, it was the government, the school, the social center, and the moral compass all rolled into one. Your life, from birth to death, is governed by its rules and its rituals. You were baptized as a baby. You go to Mass every Sunday, and you will be buried in the churchyard. The priests are the most educated people you know, and they are the interpreters of the Word of God. You don't have a personal Bible. That's a luxury for the wealthy and the learned. You get your stories and your lessons from the sermons, from the stained glass windows that tell the stories of the saints, and from the wood carvings and paintings in the church. The church is a visual and auditory feast, a stark contrast to the drab and colorless world outside. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is that many church paintings and carvings from the time are filled with gruesome and terrifying images of hell and damnation. The idea was to scare people into being good, and it probably worked, since you have a lot to lose and not much to gain from sinning. Historians still argue whether the church's power was a force for good or a tool of oppression. Did it provide comfort and hope to a people living in fear? Or did it just create another layer of control and exploitation? You don't know the answer. And you don't really care. All you know is that the church is a source of hope in a world without much of it. You pray for a good harvest, for a sick family member, and for the soul of the man who was whipped in the village square. You believe that God is watching, and that your life, no matter how hard it is, has a purpose. The church also gives you a sense of community, a time to come together with your neighbors, a shared ritual that binds you all together. But the church is not a charity. You have to pay a tithe, a portion of your harvest, to the priest. This is a non-negotiable tax on your already meager living. You give a portion of what you grow and what you earn to the church, in the hopes that you'll be able to get into heaven. It's a deal with God, and you are a willing participant. You are taught that your life on earth is just a brief test, and that your reward will come in the afterlife. This belief system makes the hardships of your life a little easier to bear. It gives you a reason to endure. You can't change your physical circumstances, but you can change your spiritual ones. And that's a powerful and comforting thought. You look at the small wooden crucifix on your wall, a simple carving that represents the suffering of Christ. You are not alone in your suffering. The saints, the martyrs, and Jesus himself, all suffered more than you can imagine. This is a source of strength, a reason to get up in the morning. The church tells you that you are not a forgotten peasant. You are a child of God, and that makes all the difference. As you close your eyes, you whisper a short prayer. The words are simple, but the feeling is profound. You are tired, you are hungry, you are covered in grime, but you are not without hope. You feel a calm wash over you, and you drift off to sleep. The memory of the church bells a soft echo in your mind. The faint sound of the church bells is replaced by the soft chatter of your family as you wake the next morning. You see your mother preparing a meager breakfast of pottage and yesterday's bread. And you're reminded of the role of women in this world. This isn't a world of career choices and equal rights. A mainstream historical fact is that a woman's life was largely defined by her relationship to men, first her father, and then her husband. Her primary role was to run the household, raise children, and contribute to the family's labor. She had little to no legal standing of her own. She couldn't own property, and her entire life was a series of duties to her family and to the manor. Your mother's day is just as long and grueling as yours, but her work is different. She tends to the small garden plot, milks the cow, spins wool into yarn, and weaves cloth. She also has to prepare all the food and do the never-ending task of keeping your hut as clean as possible, which is a Herculean effort in a world of dirt floors and no running water. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is that a woman's skill at brewing ale was often seen as a crucial part of her household duties. She had to be a master brewer, as the weak ale was a safer alternative to water for the entire family, including the children. This simple task, which sounds like a fun hobby now, was a matter of life and death. Historians still argue whether medieval women had more informal power within the family and the community than their lack of legal rights would suggest. Maybe they were the true leaders of the household, making all the decisions and holding the family together. But from your perspective, you see the limitations. You see the pain on your sister's face when she has to go to the Lord to get permission to marry. You see her fear when she is pregnant, knowing that childbirth is a major risk. A woman's life is full of both physical and emotional burdens, and there is no escape. The idea of being an independent woman is a concept so foreign it might as well be from another planet. And then there's the marriage. Marriage is not a love match, it's a financial and social arrangement. You get married to a man who can provide for you and your family. And you get married to someone who your father and the Lord approve of. A woman's virginity is a precious commodity. And if she loses it before marriage, she brings shame and financial ruin to her family. The rules are clear and strict, and there is little room for deviation. A woman's worth is tied to her purity and her ability to produce children. Preferably male ones who can carry on the family name and labor. You watch your mother and your sister, and you feel a deep sense of sadness for their lives. They are strong, they are resilient, but they are also trapped. They have no choice in their destiny, and they have to live with a constant sense of vulnerability. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and you think, what a weird thing to worry about when you have to worry about something as fundamental as your own freedom. It's a sobering thought. As you get up to get ready for your day, you realize that your own life, while hard, is also full of a certain kind of privilege. You can leave the hut, you can go to the fields, and you can interact with the wider world. For a woman, her world is much, much smaller, and you can see that in the way your mother's shoulders are permanently stooped from the labor of her life. As you reflect on the limited lives of women, you are reminded of your own cramped reality. The village, with its mud and wattle huts and dirt roads, is the only world you've ever known. But you've heard stories from traveling merchants about the cities, the teeming, vibrant hubs of life. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval cities were growing centers of trade and commerce. But they were also incredibly unsanitary, crowded, and dangerous. For a peasant, the city was a place of opportunity, a chance to escape the feudal system. A serf could gain his freedom by living in a city for a year and a day without being reclaimed by his lord. But the reality of city life was probably a shock. The first thing that would hit you is the smell. The air in the city is a thick stew of human and animal waste. Unwashed bodies, smoke from 1,000 hearths, and the stench of tanneries and butchers. There is no modern plumbing, and the streets are often rivers of filth. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is the concept of a garderobe, a medieval toilet that was essentially a small closet with a hole in the floor that emptied directly onto the street or into a moat. This was the most advanced plumbing available, and it was still a major source of disease. You're used to the smells of the farm, but this is a new, overwhelming kind of gross. The noise is also a shock. You are used to the sounds of nature, the wind in the trees, the lowing of cattle, the rustle of leaves. In the city, there is a constant, deafening roar of voices, carts, animals, and the clang of blacksmiths' hammers. There's a strange, almost electric energy to the city, but it's an energy of chaos and danger. You would be a stranger in a strange land, and you'd have to learn a new set of rules to survive. You'd have to find work as a laborer, probably in a guild, and you'd have to live in a tenement with 10 other people. Your living conditions would be just as bad, if not worse, than your peasant hut, but at least you'd be free. Historians still argue whether medieval cities were truly a melting pot of cultures and ideas, or if they were just a more concentrated version of the rural class system. Was a freed serf truly free? Or did he just trade one master for another? You'd probably find yourself under the control of a guild master, a powerful merchant who would dictate your life just like your lord did. But at least you'd have a chance to earn money, to buy things, and to have a different kind of life. And for a peasant, that's enough. The city is a place of hope, a place where the old rules don't apply. It's a risk, but it's a risk worth taking. You hear a story from a merchant about a man who ran away to the city and became a successful butcher. A man who now has a nice house and a thriving business. It sounds like a fairy tale. You look at your calloused hands and your rough tunic, and you can't imagine a world where you could own your own business. But the dream is a powerful thing. It gives you a reason to keep going, a light at the end of the long, dark tunnel of your life. The city, with all its filth and noise, is a beacon of hope. It's a place where you could be a person, not just a property. The dream of the city is a powerful one, but it's just a dream. You are a peasant, and the realities of your life are very different. You have no formal education, and neither does anyone you know. A mainstream historical fact is that literacy was extremely rare in the Middle Ages, especially among the peasantry. The ability to read and write was a skill reserved for the clergy, the nobility, and a handful of merchants. For you, the peasant, your knowledge is not written in books. It's passed down from generation to generation through oral tradition, through the stories and songs and lessons that your parents and grandparents taught you. Your education is practical. You learn how to plow a field, how to plant a crop, how to build a fire, and how to mend a fence. You learn the weather patterns, the signs of a good harvest, and the dangers of a bad one. This knowledge is crucial for your survival, and it's something a city dweller would be useless without. Your intelligence is not measured by how many books you've read but by how well you can survive. You can probably count to 10, maybe 100, using your fingers and toes. But anything more complex is a mystery. You don't need to know how to calculate interest or how to write a letter. You just need to know how to live. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is the use of tally sticks, a simple but effective accounting method. A stick was notched to record a debt or an amount of grain, and then it was split in half. One half was kept by the debtor and the other by the creditor. This was a way of recording transactions without the need for writing. Historians still argue whether the lack of literacy among the peasantry was a form of deliberate social control by the elite or just a practical result of a pre-industrial society where books were rare and expensive. But you're too busy worrying about where your next meal will come from to think about it. The lack of literacy also means that you are entirely dependent on others for information. You can't read a proclamation from the king or a notice from the Lord. You have to rely on the word of a priest or a town crier. This makes you vulnerable to misinformation and manipulation. You hear rumors and stories, but you have no way of verifying them. The world is a much smaller place for you because you can't access any knowledge that isn't right in front of you. The entire world is just a few miles wide. You hear stories of faraway lands and incredible beasts, but they sound like something from a fairy tale. You think about the small comfort of the church, where the stained glass windows are your Bible. You can't read the words, but you can understand the pictures. They tell the stories of the saints and the stories of Christ, and you can see your own life in their suffering and their hope. You feel a sense of connection, a shared history with the people of your village, all of whom are just as illiterate as you. The lack of formal education is not a source of shame, it's a fact of life. You are a different kind of intelligent. You are a survivor, and as you fall asleep, you think about the things you know and the things you don't. You know how to read the weather. You know how to read the land, and you know how to read the faces of your family. And maybe that's enough. The faint dream of a different life. The brief glimmer of hope from a traveler's tale. All of it is overshadowed by the single most terrifying and transformative event in your time. A mainstream historical fact is that the Middle Ages as you know it will be irrevocably altered by a series of devastating plagues. The most famous of which is the Black Death. It's a disease, a pestilence, that begins as a far-off rumor and then becomes a grim reality. A slow-moving, unstoppable wave of death that will change everything. You hear stories from traveling merchants about entire cities being wiped out. About people falling ill in the morning and being dead by nightfall. The symptoms are horrific. Black buboes on the body, fever, chills, and an agonizing death. You don't have a name for it yet, but you will soon. The plague spreads relentlessly, following the trade routes and the rivers. You feel a sense of dread as you hear that it has reached a village only a few days' walk away. You can't run, you can't hide, and you can't fight it. The church offers prayers and processions, but they don't seem to work. The barber surgeons are useless. Their bloodletting and herbal remedies doing nothing to stop the inevitable. The disease doesn't care if you're a lord or a peasant, it takes everyone. This is the ultimate equalizer. A reminder that in the face of nature's wrath, all the social hierarchies and feudal obligations mean nothing. Historians still argue whether the Black Death was a primary cause of the end of the feudal system or just a contributing factor. But you will see it with your own eyes. The death toll is staggering. 1 in 3, maybe even 1 in 2, will die. You will see entire families vanish. Their hovels left empty and their fields left to rot. The labor shortage that follows is a bizarre, almost unbelievable turn of events. Suddenly, there are not enough people to work the land. And for the first time in your life, you, the peasant, have leverage. You can demand higher wages, better conditions, and even a little bit of freedom. The lords are desperate, and they have to make concessions. A quirky tidbit you'd learn is the rise of plague doctors. These figures, with their strange bird-like masks and long robes, would visit the sick, not to cure them, but to record the number of dead. Their masks, which were filled with sweet-smelling herbs, were meant to ward off the bad air they believed caused the disease. You might even see one pass through your village, a surreal figure that looks more like a character from a nightmare than a medical professional. The Black Death is a nightmare, but it's also a catalyst for change. The old ways of life are dying with the people. The feudal system is beginning to crack, and you can feel the faint, distant vibrations of a new era. The world you knew is gone. Your family might be gone. Your neighbors might be gone. But you, by some miracle, are still here. And you are a different kind of peasant now. You have power you never had before. You can move to a different manor, one with better terms. You can demand a real wage. You are no longer just a piece of property. You are a valuable commodity. The memory of the crocodile dung sunscreen feels absurdly trivial now. The real danger was never the sun, it was the invisible, silent enemy that came on the wind. As you stand in your empty village, the silence is not peaceful, it's a silent scream. But you are alive, and for the first time in your life, you are truly, deeply, and terrifyingly free.